In the previous episode of Medieval Madness, we looked into some of the worst jobs available in the medieval era. These included jobs such as the gong farmer, the executioner, the tanner, and the leech collectors. Well, now it's time to look at some of the best jobs of the medieval era. Welcome to Medieval Madness. In the 9th century, King Alfred the Great of Britain had the book The Consolation of Philosophy translated into Old English. The book argued that the celestial movement of the stars could affect events on Earth. It meant that astrological theory could impact every part of human life. The medieval astrologer used the heavens for reference as well as weather patterns and the cycle of the seasons. It was thought that this could help to understand the complexities of agriculture, such as when and where to plant the crops to get the best harvest. There were conflicted theories encompassing astrology. Some claimed that the moon revolved around the Earth, others that the Earth revolved around the sun. One reason for Columbus's 1492 voyage to the Americas was to dismiss the flat Earth theory, over 500 years ago. Astrologers were considered scholars and were lauded in academic circles. They would give advice such as when to buy horses or land, when it was best to take medicine for the legs or have intercourse, whether one should travel a long way that week or even if they should take a bath. Astrology was a vital part of medicine, and physicians believed that the signs of the zodiac controlled different parts of the body and treatments. Bleeding was believed to be more successful if the moon was in a certain constellation. Up until the 18th century, some universities would not allow a doctor to qualify unless he had passed an exam in astrology. Christianity dominated the lives of people living in most European countries during the Middle Ages, so being a member of the clergy was always a good choice. Everyone feared God and obeyed the laws of the church, even the king and his nobles, who donated a lot of land and money to the church. Cardinals and bishops were appointed by the Pope himself and were often the younger sons of powerful nobles, but even the lower-ranking members of the clergy were in the class just below knights. Priests and monks were excused from paying taxes. They were paid by their parishioners in the form of tithes, which was a tenth of whatever they had, whether it was crops, money, or other goods. In the monasteries, the money was used to buy books and candles, which were needed for the scribes who would work in the scriptorium. They were specially trained to make copies of manuscript in Latin, Hebrew, and Greek, sometimes without even understanding the language. The texts were usually written in calligraphy and contained beautiful illustrations. It could take over a year to copy a Bible. The higher the status, the better lifestyle a man or woman of the cloth could expect to receive. Cardinals and bishops led very privileged lives. On the whole, even the lower orders of clergy benefited from a secure place to live and a regular supply of food, which was usually of a higher standard than that which most of medieval society was used to. Although the job of an innkeeper carried a lot of responsibility, it was also a very lucrative occupation. Travelling during the 14th and 15th centuries became quite common. Many roads were in a bad state of repair and sometimes even inaccessible for large loaded wagons, which were also vulnerable to outlaws and robbers. It was easier and safer to travel either on foot or preferably by horse. Most travellers found safety in numbers and moved in groups during the day because there were long sections of forest between towns and villages. This inability to sleep outside in safety led to the demand for alehouses and inns. The inn of a town would play an essential role in the economy and social welfare of a community. Usually located centrally, such as in the town square or at a crossroads where trade routes met, inns would often become a landmark in the area. Inns in the Middle Ages usually concentrated on providing food and accommodation, whilst taverns were usually owned by a brewer or vintner and focused on delivering a never-ending supply of drink. Food often consisted of bread and cheese or a simple stew known as pottage. Wines and ales were usually sourced locally or made on site. The inn layout generally consisted of a hall, kitchen and stables, private accommodation for the innkeeper, and a room with several straw beds known as a chamber. There may also have been a private room that could be rented out to local guilds for private functions. Inns were subjected to high taxes by the local lord. Bedrooms and communal areas had to be maintained to provide a good quality service. The innkeeper was also responsible for the quality of the goods offered to his customers and a level of security, as alehouses could often be violent places. Many innkeepers would employ guards who would charge customers an entry fee to cover any damages that they may cause whilst visiting. The modern-day word bouncer is derived from the practice of inn guards bouncing a coin off a wet piece of wood to test whether it was forgery or not. Inns were a central hub for people to meet and socialise, making them political and cultural hotbeds. It wasn't unusual for uprisings to begin here, such as the Peasants' Revolt of England in 1381. All this lucrative business made a lot of money for the innkeeper. He was usually one of the most rich and influential men in town. Many were involved in trade and commerce, and they could act as brokers for dealers and merchants, and were often part of local councils. Not long after the First Crusade in 1099, several military orders of knighthood were founded, such as the Knights Hospitallers and the Knights Templars. But by the late medieval period, the title had become synonymous with the ideals of chivalry and the perfect warrior. A knight would start their training as a page. They had to be of noble birth, usually the son of a lord or a knight. Only in rare cases was a commoner knighted, usually as an award for outstanding military bravery. As infants, they were taught etiquette and given a basic education until they were 7 years old. Then they would be given over to a lord's care and given the title page. Training in skills such as archery, swordplay, fighting and jousting on piggyback went on until the age of 14, when they would be promoted to squire. Now the knighthood training became far more dangerous. Squires were expected to assist older knights during battles by cleaning and carrying armor, as well as looking after the horses and packing any belongings. Training in castle and siege warfare, which was common during the medieval period, was required. It was important to capture an enemy castle in order to bring down their power base, so squires learned about weapons used in siege warfare as well as the strategies and processes used. Chivalric rules had to be adhered, so attempts for a truce would always be conducted before warfare started. Defense of a castle was also taught along with castle designs such as layouts and traps, and attack would be studied along with the weapons used such as battering rams, trebuchet, ballista, and mangonel. Learning how to climb well was also important for the scaling of walls. Armor was very expensive and had to be specially made to fit. Badly fitted armor would slow a knight down in battle. At first, garments were made from iron plates and chainmail, but this was revised to plate armor in the late 13th century and full plate armor by the 15th. Even the horses would be fitted with armor for protection on the battlefield. During hand-to-hand combat, gadlings would be used, which were spikes fixed onto the knuckles of a knight's gauntlets. Usually a dagger, known as a roundel, would be carried on his belt, as well as a broadsword. On horseback, he would carry a shield bearing the family crest, and in the other hand, a lance. Knights would practice their skills at jousts and tournaments in a series of either armoured melee fights on foot or in mounted combat. This was dangerous, but the prize money was usually pretty good and kept the knights prepared for real warfare. The contests were thrilling and vibrant occasions where hundreds would attend to see the pomp and ceremony. In European society, medieval knights held an elite position. During battle they were feared and protected, and when not in combat they were regarded as the most fashionable and gentlemanly citizens. Much as it is today, jobs and occupations would dictate the quality of a life during the Middle Ages. Those with wealth, status, and power were much more likely to enjoy their existence, even with the ever-present shadow of disease and death that existed in medieval times. Thank you for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Please do subscribe if you enjoy and hit the notification bell to be alerted when a new video is released every week.